Okay, this week we're taking a look at a simple concept, but one that can be very powerful if utilized creatively and in the proper way. One thing to note here is every control object you can put on a form has a tag property here. So if I go down to this tag property in my properties window here, right now I've got this checkbox selected. And you can see over here that there's a value entered in this tag property. So basically, if you give a little background, what we got here is just a simple little program. It's kind of silly. It's so simple. We'd add a lot more to this, obviously, if we were really going to use it. But basically what I've got here is a program that if we run it, and I'm ordering a hot dog, and so I can check the different toppings or uncheck them. It's $2 for this hot dog with nothing on it, basically. If I want the sauerkraut, it's $2.25. If I add cheese, it's another 50 cents, $2.75. And if I add relish, it's another 15 cents. I'm up to $2.90. So it's basically if I uncheck them, it goes back down, right? Pretty simple. Not a hard program at all. However, what you'll notice here is that, when I'm running this, I'm just checking these boxes, and it's automatically updating out down here. I'm not having to click another button or tell it anything else. It's just automatically updating. Well, one reason it's doing that is we've got check changed event in there for these check boxes, right? Now, since these are different prices, there's a lot of ways I could go about this, but if I am adding different prices to these and the different check buttons, I could have different check changed events for each of these check boxes, and that would be a pain. And I've got different amounts that are getting added and subtracted. It could add up to a lot of code in this program just for doing this simple little thing right here. But that's where this tag property can come into play. Basically what I've done here is I've put the value of each of these toppings into this tag property. So like I said, the sauerkraut was 25 cents. If I click the cheese, 50 cents. Relish, it's 15 cents down here, right? And so like I said, any control object has that tag property. If I click the group box, its tag property there, it's empty because I don't need it for anything. But every control object I put on a form has that tag property, and I can use it for a variety of things, okay? Since I've got these check boxes and I want to have one click event for them, or one check changed event, really, right, as I'm clicking on those different check boxes, notice we've just got, and there's a lot more code in here than there really needs to be, but I wanted to basically have comments in here to explain everything so you could take a look at this. There's a picture of this in the curriculum, so you don't have to freeze the video and look at it or anything if you don't want to. But basically, you'll notice here, I've got an event handler that handles all of these checkboxes, check changed events, right? Now, one thing to note, some parts of this event get put in for us, right? When we double click on one of those checkboxes, the default event is a check changed event, right? We've kind of been taking some of this stuff for granted in here, right? That comes in for us by default. Right in here, after the name of the event, we've got this little bit of code here that says sender as system object. So basically what this is doing right here is this will identify which object triggered this event. Okay? So that's a little clue, and we'll get into the E and system event args stuff down the road later. But we can utilize this information right here to find out which of these checkboxes triggered this check changed event. Okay? Now there's a couple things we have to do for that. First off, we have to dimension an object that's equal to that sender. Okay? So since the object is a checkbox, we've been dimensioning all these variable types that are just holding different types of data, we can actually dimension object variables too. So we're dimensioning check selected toppings as a checkbox, and it equals sender. What sender is the object that triggered the event. So basically when we do this, we create this object variable and make it equal to sender. Whatever object triggered the event, all of its properties then are going to be stored in this object variable. Okay, and of course one of our properties of this object was that tag property. Okay, so basically what I'm doing down here is just saying, well, if the checkbox was checked in the check change event, so it looks at the checked property, if it was checked, then what I want to do is add to the price the value that was in the tag property, check selected toppings.tag. So it's going back to this variable and saying, look at the tag property. Now, you notice I have a val function on there, and the reason for that is all data that you put in the tag property is by default a string. So if I want to do a mathematical function with it, it has to go through the val function. Hopefully you remember that the val function goes through strings of text and pulls out any numbers. So it's going to look in there, and in the instance of relish, it would see that 0.15. The val function would go through there, pull out the 0.15, and add it to price. So you remember the default price for the hot dog was $2, so that's set in here as a static variable, so that as these get checked, it won't revert back to $2. It can basically act like an accumulator, right? So the if is, if it's checked, put the tag property through the val function, add it to the price. The else here, so the only other, it can only be checked or unchecked, right? So if it's unchecked, we want to take that tag property, put it through the val function, and subtract it from the price. And so that's how we're getting a program here that can just, you're clicking those check boxes and it's adding and subtracting as it needs. So that's just one example of using the tag property. You know, if I take out all the comments, there's not a whole lot of code here, and that's because I'm able to utilize that tag property to identify, I'm identifying which checkbox got clicked, and I'm adding or subtracting from the price. So this is just kind of one example of how that tag property could be used. The imagination is kind of your limit there on what you could do with the tag property to help you identify stuff. One thing I would say that's maybe a little disadvantage of this is, since this information of the prices is in the design window in that tag property and it's not real visible when you're in the code window, it's probably a good idea to put that in here as comments, so that someone editing this program would have to go back and would know to go back into the design window and change the tag property because it's not in the code area here. Now, one thing to note is, let's say in this hot dog program I wanted to put a menu strip up here and be able to pick things off the menu strip too. That's a good practice, to have everything that's in your GUI at some way in a menu item type of thing, because we'll get to the point of putting in keyboard shortcuts and all that stuff down the road too. If I did put in a menu item in here, I cannot, I can put those same tag properties, the same values in the tag property for the menu items, right? But I can't put the menu items in the same check event. Number one, it's not a check changed anyway, it's just a click event, right? And number two, the bigger thing is, I cannot send that tool strip menu item to this checkbox and get it to hold this. It's just like me trying to put a string into an integer, and that's not the same data type. So I can't get the properties from a menu strip item and put them into a checkbox. So if I wanted to do that, I would have to have a whole nother click event in here, a whole nother event that handled the menu items click event, and then I would dimension a tool strip menu item as a, I could dimension MNU selected toppings as tool strip menu item equals sender in that event. It would have all the same code then after that, except for it would have a different object variable dimension. So that is kind of one thing about this that adds to it a little bit, is you do have to have different event handlers for your menu items and your other objects, because you can't combine those objects. Okay, but it's still a very helpful tool that you can do a lot of things with. So hopefully you'll have a good time making your assignment this week using that tag property.